In the quiet tree-lined streets of Willow Creek, a fragile peace once reigned, meticulously cultivated by its residents, built on the assumption of security and the warm embrace of community. It was a place where the familiar rhythm of daily life, the gentle hum of neighborly trust, and the unwavering loyalty of a cherished pet created an impenetrable shield against the harsh realities of the outside world. Eleanor Vance, a woman of vibrant spirit and a passionate gardener, embodied this suburban ideal, her home a testament to her creative heart, always open in subtle ways to her beloved golden retriever Barley. Yet beneath this idyllic facade, a sinister truth sometimes festers, unseen, unheard, waiting for the opportune moment to shatter everything we believe. What happens when the most innocent of gestures becomes an invitation to horror? What chilling betrayal unfolds when the most faithful of guardians offers not a single bark, leaving only an eerie, profound silence in its wake? Willow Creek projected an image of suburban tranquility, a community where the rhythm of life flowed with predictable calm. Eleanor Vance, a landscape architect approaching 40, was a vital thread in its fabric, her energy infused into the very earth she shaped. Her home, a testament to her vibrant artistic vision, was inseparable from her constant companion Barley, a golden retriever whose loyalty was absolute. Their days moved with a seamless grace, morning walks along winding paths, Eleanor's thoughtful sketches, and evenings spent amidst the burgeoning life of her own extraordinary garden Barley, often settled nearby, a devoted companion. Neighbors spoke of Eleanor's warmth, her easy smile, and the genuine kindness that softened her every interaction. Her charming craftsman house, with its inviting porch, seemed to radiate a quiet, unshakable sense of security. Yet this idyllic tableau carried a subtle, almost imperceptible flaw. On balmy nights, a small kitchen window would remain unlatched, an innocent concession to Barley's freedom, allowing him access to the cool night air and the familiar scents of the garden. It was a simple act of trust, a testament to Eleanor's open nature and her belief in the impenetrable shield of her home. This unexamined vulnerability, born of affection and a deep-seated sense of safety, would ultimately become the critical fracture point in her meticulously crafted world. It was a detail, so small, so commonplace, that its profound implications lay entirely hidden, waiting to be ruthlessly exploited. Those who treasured Eleanor would later speak of the radiant light she brought to every life she touched. She had this incredible spark. Her sister Clara would recount her voice still raw with an enduring grief. Her laugh. It was full and free, a sound that could fill any space with pure joy. The idea that someone could take that from the world, from us, is something you just never truly process. This was the Eleanor Vance, remembered a life vibrant, with promise abruptly silenced, leaving behind a void that time could only begin to soften. The faint, bruised light of false dawn kissed the quiet streets of Willow Creek as Dr. Marcus Thorne, a surgical resident, pulled his car into his driveway. The exhaustion from an arduous overnight shift at the hospital was a heavy cloak, yet a familiar current of anticipation stirred within him. He pictured Barley, Eleanor's golden retriever, bounding at the door, Eleanor herself, perhaps already awake brewing coffee. This was the steady, cherished rhythm that anchored his demanding life, the private sanctuary he yearned for. But as he approached the front door, a subtle anomaly snagged his attention. The solid oak, typically secured, stood ajar by a whisper, a sliver of darkness where certainty should have been. Marcus frowned, a professional unease beginning to prick at the edges of his fatigue. He pushed the door open, the faint creak echoing in a silence that was not merely quiet but utterly profoundly absent. No welcoming bark, no thud of paws, no cheerful jingle of Barley's tags. The lack of sound was a suffocating pressure, replacing the expected comfort with an immediate, sickening dread. Eleanor, his voice, a thin, reedy sound, dissolved into the oppressive void. No answer. His hand instinctively went for his phone, then hesitated, a deeper primal fear overriding logic. Each step into the house felt heavier, his heart now a frantic, irregular drumbeat against his ribs. The kitchen, usually a space of soft ambient light even in darkness, was dim, but his eyes locked onto the window above the sink. It hung wide open, swaying almost imperceptibly with a faint morning draft. A profound chill, entirely unrelated to the cool air, coiled down his spine. Then his gaze drifted to the living room. What he saw there seized his breath, locking him in the doorway. Disarray. A fallen lamp cushion scattered from the sofa, and then Eleanor. Motionless, lifeless. Her usually vibrant clothes, a stark, tragic contrast against the pale rug, her body angled in a way that screamed unnatural. The world which moments before had promised a peaceful morning violently fractured, shattering into a million jagged fragments of incomprehensible horror. The air evacuated from Marcus's lungs, leaving him gasping for nothing. His mind, rigorously trained for crisis and precise action, locked in a brutal, paralyzing loop of disbelief. He collapsed, not from choice, but because the very strength had simply abandoned his legs. The familiar contours of his life had vanished, irrevocably replaced by this unspeakable, nightmarish tableau. All that remained was a silent, guttural scream trapped behind frozen lips. The first shriek of sirens tore through the pre-dawn quiet of Willow Creek, a raw, piercing sound that shredded the lingering tranquility. Blue and red lights pulsed erratically across manicured lawns, and the hushed facades of homes rousing stunned residents who peered from behind curtains, their faces a canvas of fear and burgeoning dread. The sanctity of their suburban haven had been violently breached. Patrol officers, their expressions grim, moved with efficient purpose, swiftly cordoning off Eleanor Vance's residence. Inside, a chaotic tableau unfolded. EMC worked with quiet urgency around a shell-shocked Marcus Thorne, his grief a palpable weight in the air, while hushed voices over police radios confirmed the grim reality of a homicide. Yet as the initial shock began to recede, trained eyes registered details that defied standard expectations. No splintered door frames, no shattered glass, none of the typical signs of a forceful intrusion. The disarray within the living room appeared contained almost ritualistic, lacking the widespread destruction of a desperate struggle. Detective Sergeant Sarah Jenkins, her stance conveying years of weary experience, tempered by an unwavering competence, arrived on scene with Detective Mark Riley. Jenkins, whose pragmatic demeanor was a product of countless investigations, immediately began a systematic survey of the perimeter. Riley, methodical and observant, collected initial reports from the responding officers. A palpable question began to permeate the heavy air, eclipsing the immediate horror. Where was Barley, Eleanor's famously devoted golden retriever? An officer's subtle gesture drew their attention towards a shadowed corner of the living room near an overturned armchair. There, almost camouflaged in the subdued light, sat Barley. His golden fur, usually shimmering with vitality, appeared dulled, his head bowed his eyes wide and unseeing. There was no growl, no whimper, not even the softest sigh. He was utterly still, an unnatural silence, radiating from a creature renowned for his boisterous affection and fierce protectiveness. This profound stillness, this unprecedented lack of response, struck Jenkins with an almost physical force. A large, vigilant dog present during a violent home invasion, yet completely eerily mute. It was a detail that shattered every expectation, a chilling void at the heart of the crime, immediately transforming the case into a baffling mystery demanding an answer far more intricate than any simple break-in could provide. The residence, once a private haven, now lay exposed as a sterile grid of yellow tape and forensic markers. The initial stages of the investigation unfolded with a methodical precision that felt jarringly clinical against the raw violence that had just transpired. Detective Sergeant Sarah Jenkins moved through the scene with an almost unsettling composure, her instructions to the forensic teams sharp and clear-cutting through the hushed tension that clung to every surface. Her keen gaze missed nothing, even as the profound emotional weight of the tragedy settled heavily on everyone present. Every surface processed Jenkins commanded a lead technician, her voice low, resolute. The kitchen window particularly, inside and out. Any tool marks, any unusual scuffs, anything that speaks of entry. Her attention returned repeatedly to the open sash, the primary anomaly. It hung still ajar, catching the faint morning light, yet offered no discernible evidence of forced manipulation. No fresh pry marks scored the wood, no shattered glass lay scattered, not even a smudged print marred the exterior sill. This absence of conventional evidence was in itself a perplexing clue deepening the mystery of the breach. Simultaneously, Detective Mark Riley began the arduous task of constructing Eleanor Vance's final hours. He conducted initial interviews, starting with Marcus Thorne, whose grief still held him in a state of suspended disbelief, then moved to the stunned residents of Willow Creek. Each conversation, regardless of its brevity, was meticulously logged. "Did you observe anything out of the ordinary last night, Mr. Henderson? Any unfamiliar vehicles? Any strange sounds?" Riley's inquiries were precise, his tone empathetic, yet insistent, sifting for any fragment that might illuminate the darkness that had descended. The most persistent, gnawing question, however, remained rooted in the heart of the enigma, the unseen entry. How had an intruder gained access to Eleanor's home without leaving a single conventional trace of a break-in? More profoundly, how had they bypassed Barley Eleanor's fiercely protective golden retriever without eliciting a single growl or bark of warning? The dog's eerie, uncharacteristic silence, initially a disturbing detail, had now become the pivotal riddle, forcing the detectives to discard standard assumptions. It hinted at a terrifying truth the team was only beginning to confront, that the perpetrator might not have been an unknown threat, but rather someone familiar, someone Barley and perhaps Eleanor herself had unknowingly trusted. The cold facts of the crime scene offered no easy answers, only intensifying the unsettling certainty of a meticulously concealed act. As the initial shock of Eleanor Vance's murder gave way to the relentless demands of investigation, the scope widened systematically, pulling at every thread of her life. Dr. Marcus Thorne, despite the profound, visible weight of his grief, underwent the rigorous scrutiny applied to any close associate of a victim. His alibi was swiftly confirmed. Hospital records corroborated by multiple surgical staff placed him undeniably in the operating room during the critical hours of the night. This removed him from immediate suspicion, though his profound loss remained a silent, constant presence in the early stages of the case. Detectives Jenkins and Riley methodically peeled back layers of Eleanor's professional and personal world. Her landscape architecture firm, Green Canvas Designs, provided an initial avenue. Colleagues universally praised Eleanor's talent and dedication, but also recalled a recent contentious interaction with Arthur Finch, a notoriously difficult real estate developer. Finch had abruptly canceled a significant design project, subsequently barraging Eleanor with a torrent of aggressive accusatory emails, convinced she had intentionally undermined his business dealings. This tangible animosity, documented in vitriolic digital correspondence, presented a compelling, albeit volatile lead. It offered a seemingly plausible motive rooted in professional revenge or extreme resentment. Detective Riley pursued this avenue with diligence. He painstakingly reviewed the vitriolic exchanges, noting the escalating threats embedded within Finch's words. Arthur Finch was located at a remote cabin and subjected to an intense interview. His initial defensiveness soon gave way to indignant denials of any involvement. His alibi for the night of the murder, though less concrete than Thorne's, eventually held placing him hours away, confirmed by a spotty cell signal and a time-stamped receipt from a rural convenience store. This promising lead, while consuming valuable time and resources, ultimately dissolved, leaving investigators to reassess. Such detours are an inherent frustrating part of any complex homicide inquiry, narrowing the field through elimination. This critical phase served to establish a comprehensive profile of Eleanor Vance's connections and any latent antagonisms, while simultaneously underscoring the formidable challenges of a broad-spectrum search. The lack of forced entry, coupled with Barley's chilling silence, continued to dominate the detective's thoughts, a persistent, unsettling anomaly that whispered of a calculated, intimate horror rather than a random act. Each alibi verified, each person cleared painstakingly, brought the investigative team closer to the deeply disturbing truth lurking beneath the surface. The profound enigma of Barley's silence continued to torment Detective Sergeant Jenkins and Detective Riley, a discordant note in an otherwise meticulously managed investigation. Conventional theories of a violent home invasion simply crumbled in the face of the golden retriever's uncharacteristic stillness during the commission of the crime. Had he been physically subdued, drugged into submission? These persistent questions mandated a comprehensive veterinary examination. Dr. Anya Sharma, a local animal forensic specialist, conducted a battery of rigorous tests. Her report was unequivocal. Barley had sustained no physical trauma, nor were there any traces of sedatives or depressants in his system. He was physically unharmed. His profound lethargy was purely a behavioral manifestation. This finding, while narrowing the scope of possibilities, only deepened the baffling mystery of his non-response. So, he just allowed it, Riley murmured, a flicker of frustration crossing his features as he reviewed Dr. Sharma's findings. Jenkins, her gaze fixed on a crime scene photograph of Barley, still huddled in the living room, shook her head slowly. That's inconsistent with a dog like Barley, especially a protector. We're overlooking a crucial element, something fundamental about the interaction. It was an unconventional line of thought, but the case itself had from the outset defied every convention. This unprecedented behavioral puzzle compelled the detectives to seek expertise beyond the standard parameters of forensic science. They reached out to Dr. Evelyn Reed, a nationally recognized canine behaviorist from the State University, whose work encompassed animal psychology and law enforcement K-9 units. Dr. Reed arrived at the precinct, her demeanor composed and analytical, a calm counterpoint to the relentless urgency of the investigation. Jenkins methodically presented the facts: a fiercely loyal golden retriever, an open window, a brutal murder, and an absolute confounding silence from the dog. Dr. Reed listened with focused intensity, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Dogs, particularly intelligent breeds like golden retrievers, are profoundly attuned to their environment and, crucially, to their human companions, she explained, her voice even. Their instinct is to protect, to sound an alarm. For Barley to remain silent, to retreat into himself, suggests a profound disruption in his perceived threat assessment. It argues strongly against a stranger violently forcing entry. A dog's reaction to a known individual, even one whose behavior is unsettling, differs fundamentally from their response to an unknown aggressor. She paused, allowing the gravity of her statement to fully resonate. His silence, detectives, is not a testament to indifference. It is in fact a powerful, unspoken testimony that the perpetrator was not perceived as a threat. Someone he recognized. Someone he trusted, or at the very least, someone he did not actively identify as an enemy. This theory struck the detectives with the cold shock of an undeniable truth. Jenkins's pragmatic evidence focused approach, typically anchored to the tangible, now had to incorporate the intricate nuances of animal behavior. This revelation marked a pivotal turning point, fundamentally reorienting their entire investigation. The convenient narrative of a random break in a brutal act by an unknown assailant dissolved under the weight of Barley's unspoken testimony. The pursuit of justice had abruptly shifted course. Killer was not a phantom lurking in the shadows. They were, in all chilling probability, a figure already present within Eleanor's intimate circle, a familiar face who had maliciously exploited an innocent habit and a loyal dog's unwavering trust. The true hunt for Eleanor Vance's murderer, now redefined by the most unexpected witness, had truly begun. As the investigation pivoted towards Eleanor Vance's inner circle, the meticulous efforts of the forensic team began to unveil critical, undeniable truths. These were the lingering threads, minute fragments of evidence, slowly coalescing into a devastating mosaic of the crime. Among the first and most harrowing discoveries was trace DNA found beneath Eleanor's fingernails. Microscopic epidermal cells, a silent, desperate testament to her final moments, were carefully collected and dispatched for analysis. This grim detail confirmed a struggle, indicating that in her last breath, Eleanor had confronted her assailant, clutching onto a piece of his identity. It was a harrowing confirmation of a violent encounter, a stark contrast to the initial lack of obvious struggle within the home, hinting at the brutal swiftness of the attack. Then came the subtle yet profoundly significant recovery of a unique synthetic fiber. This minuscule strand, an almost iridescent blue-gray, was meticulously extracted from the fabric of Eleanor's sweater. It bore no resemblance to any textile material found within her home, among her wardrobe, or within her known possessions. This foreign fiber, a silent, damning hitchhiker, pointed unequivocally to the presence of an outside element, a piece of the perpetrator, unknowingly carried from their own life into Eleanor's violated sanctuary. Its rare composition suggested it would prove a powerful identifier, a distinct physical signature left behind by the attacker. Perhaps the most perplexing piece of forensic evidence emerged from the very point of entry that had initially stumped detectives: the kitchen window. On the inside ledge, a partial yet remarkably clear latent fingerprint was discovered. This print, once carefully lifted and analyzed, matched no one in Eleanor's intimate circle, nor any individual indexed in local or national criminal databases. The critical detail, however, was its specific location, demonstrably on the inside of the window frame. This finding simultaneously bolstered the unseen entry narrative while introducing a new layer of complexity. It suggested the window was not forcefully opened from the exterior, but rather manipulated by someone already familiar with the access point or intentionally staged to appear as a break-in after entry. This print, therefore, became a powerful, silent witness, an invisible signature awaiting its match, linking a specific physical presence to the very act of intrusion. These disparate pieces of evidence, seemingly isolated collectively, began to paint a chilling picture, confirming the violent confrontation and inexorably guiding the detectives closer to a truth far more disturbing than a random act of violence. With Dr. Reed's illuminating insights into Barley's behavior, coupled with the increasingly compelling forensic evidence, detectives Jenkins and Riley radically reevaluated their investigative paradigm. The initial premise of an unknown random assailant dissolved, replaced by a chilling, far more intimate possibility. The perpetrator was likely someone embedded within Eleanor's established circle of trust. Their focus sharpened, narrowing to the immediate neighborhood once seen as a bastion of peace, now scrutinized with a fresh, wary lens. They systematically conducted follow-up interviews with neighbors, not merely to verify alibis, but to glean deeper observations regarding relationships, routines, and any subtle shifts in personal conduct. Among these, particular attention settled on David Miller, a seemingly convivial man in his mid-40s who resided just 2 houses down. Miller was universally known as the quintessential helpful neighbor, quick with a friendly wave, always ready to assist, and notably a frequent companion for Barley's walks when Eleanor's demanding schedule kept her occupied. He projected an outward aura of profound sorrow for Eleanor's tragic passing, presenting himself as a pillar of community concern. Jenkins and Riley approached Miller at his home. He greeted them with a practiced, solemn courtesy, reiterating his condolences, his voice laced with what appeared to be genuine distress. He spoke fondly of his casual friendship with Eleanor, describing her infectious laugh and his undeniable affection for Barley. Eleanor was a truly exceptional person, he stated, meeting Jenkins's gaze directly, and Barley, well, Barley felt like family. We had a real rapport. You know, he always looked forward to our walks. He recounted their last seemingly innocuous interaction, a brief friendly chat over the fence about Eleanor's new rose bushes, mere days before the murder, effectively positioning himself as a devoted, if casually familiar friend. However, as Detective Jenkins subtly shifted her line of questioning, her tone remaining calm, but her inquiries becoming more precise, faint hairline fractures began to appear in Miller's meticulously constructed narrative. When asked for his specific movements on the night of the murder, he initially offered a vague account of an early night, claiming he was just watching TV, might have drifted off. Gently pressed for more granular details, his eyes, which had been steady, began to flicker erratically. A faint tremor entered his voice as he then mentioned an unexpected trip to a late-night pharmacy for an over-the-counter sleep aid, a detail he conspicuously forgot to include in his initial voluntary statement to patrol officers. The seasoned detective persona of Jenkins was keenly evident. Her approach was patient, unhurried, yet subtly relentless. She did not accuse, but rather observed the telling physical cues. The nascent sheen of sweat on Miller's upper lip, the way his hands initially relaxed, now clasped and unclasped with unconscious tension. The charming, neighborly veneer he had so carefully maintained began to thin, revealing a profound underlying nervousness. The investigative net was tightening, not yet around a confirmed perpetrator, but unmistakably around a specific, seemingly friendly face. The chilling possibility that the man who had regularly walked Eleanor's beloved dog, the man who lived a mere stone's throw away, might be the very individual who had so brutally extinguished her life, began to solidify in the detectives' minds. Barley's unwavering silence, once an inscrutable detail, now echoed with the horrifying implications of a deep and insidious familiarity. The interrogation room, a sterile box of pale walls, and an unyielding table felt a universe away from the idyllic comfort of Willow Creek. David Miller entered willingly, his attire neat, his posture carefully composed. He projected an aura of cooperative innocence, a practiced, strained smile hinting at the deceptive suspect persona, at full deployment calm, subtly manipulative, ready to deflect. He immediately voiced his distress over Eleanor Vance's tragic death, reiterating their friendship in a voice that was steady, though subtly pitched higher than natural. Detective Jenkins sat opposite him, her posture relaxed, her tone conversational, almost disarmingly so. This was the strategic prelude designed to cultivate a false sense of security, to encourage Miller to elaborate before the intricate web of evidence began to constrict. Riley remained silent at her side, his gaze unwavering, studying every fleeting micro-expression, every nervous shift in Miller's carefully controlled demeanor. Jenkins began by gently guiding Miller through the established narrative, the chilling timeline of the crime, the heartbreaking discovery made by Marcus Thorne. Then, with a calibrated shift, she introduced the insights from Dr. Reed, the canine behaviorist. Barley offered no alarm, Mr. Miller. She stated, her gaze steady, direct. Dr. Reed's analysis suggests such a non-reaction points to a specific conclusion. The dog knew the person who entered the home, someone he implicitly trusted. Miller's carefully maintained expression flickered, a momentary tightening around his eyes, quickly masked by a feigned look of surprise. That's truly awful. Poor Barley, completely helpless. He attempted to pivot, to introduce speculative scenarios, his voice retaining its smooth, controlled cadence. But Jenkins pressed on, slowly tightening the invisible vise. She moved to the forensic findings, detailing the rare blue-gray synthetic fiber. This fiber, Mr. Miller, was painstakingly recovered from Eleanor's sweater. It's a very specific material, one completely inconsistent with anything found within her residence. Miller's composure began its inevitable descent. His eyes darted around the stark room, no longer able to meet Jenkins's steady gaze. He fidgeted his foot, beginning an agitated tap beneath the table. I have no knowledge of any such thing. I predominantly wear cotton. His denials were quick, almost reflexively automatic. Then came the final, crushing piece of physical evidence, the partial fingerprint, remarkably clear and undeniable, meticulously lifted from the inside ledge of Eleanor's kitchen window. This print, Mr. Miller Jenkins, announced her voice, losing its gentle, probing quality, becoming sharper imbued with quiet authority, was subjected to rigorous analysis. It does not belong to Eleanor. It does not belong to Marcus. It does not belong to any first responder. And it most certainly does not belong to a random casual intruder. She paused, allowing the escalating silence to amplify the full, devastating weight of the revelation. Miller swallowed hard, his Adam's apple visibly bobbing. His face moments ago, so placidly composed, began to flush a deep crimson. His defensive denials quickly spiraled into agitated outbursts, his voice rising, cracking with a raw, undeniable fear. Charming veneer he had projected had not merely fractured. It was now shattering, revealing the panicked desperation beneath. The walls had irrevocably closed in. The interrogation reached its brutal apex. David Miller, his face now contorted into a mask of frantic desperation, had exhausted every denial, every feigned indignation. Detective Jenkins, her gaze unyielding, had systematically shredded his fabricated alibi, laying bare the irrefutable weight of the forensic evidence. She watched as the meticulously crafted facade of the deceptive suspect finally irrevocably shattered under the crushing pressure. Mr. Miller Jenkins's voice was calm, yet resonated with an undeniable authority. The DNA beneath Eleanor's fingernails belongs to you. The unique blue-gray fiber on her sweater matches your jacket. And that clear fingerprint on the inside ledge of her kitchen window, it is unequivocally yours. She allowed the chilling finality of her words to hang in the suffocating silence of the room. Barley didn't bark because he recognized you. You were a familiar face, a frequent presence. You were her friend. Now tell us what truly transpired, David. Miller recoiled as if physically struck. His carefully constructed world imploded, replaced by a torrent of raw, agitated words. His voice, once smooth and controlled, now emerged as a ragged gasp, a frantic jumble of self-pity and chilling admissions. He confessed to a dark, possessive fixation on Eleanor Vance, a twisted fantasy that had festered beneath his innocuous neighborly charm. He had methodically observed her routines, her small, trusting habits, especially the open kitchen window on warm nights. This innocent gesture intended for her dog, he had perverted into an implicit invitation, a sign of a connection that existed only in his warped mind. He admitted to entering Eleanor's home that night through that very window. His heart had not thudded with fear, but with a perverse sense of triumphant entitlement. Barley, true to Dr. Reed's expert theory, had offered no warning. He had merely looked up, perhaps a soft tail wag, acknowledging a familiar, non-threatening presence. This placid acceptance from the loyal dog had only inflamed Miller's delusion, validating his imagined bond with Eleanor. The details that tumbled from his lips were a chilling narrative of insidious betrayal and opportunistic violence. He claimed he had approached Eleanor in the living room, not with an intent to kill, but to clarify things, to make her understand their supposed intimacy. When her confusion abruptly shifted to alarm, when she recoiled from his touch, his fragile fantasy fractured, and with it, any semblance of his self-control. The ensuing struggle was swift, brutal. A desperate fight for a life, already being suffocated by an unholy possessiveness. The revelation of David Miller's calculated predation sent a cold shockwave through the investigative team. The man who had worn the mask of an ordinary helpful neighbor was, in truth, a ravenous monster, cunningly operating beneath a veneer of charming affability. The raw, guttural sounds emanating from Miller were not remorse, but the stark, animalistic terror of a man finally confronted with the abhorrent reflection of his true self, stripped bare of all pretense. It was a terrifying descent into the blackest depths of human depravity, a stark reminder that the most profound evil often lurks unseen in the most unassuming places. The truth, meticulously brought to light by the silent testimonies of forensic science, and the unsettling behavioral patterns of a loyal dog had finally exposed Eleanor Vance's killer, revealing a monster hiding in tragically plain sight. The arduous, often labyrinthine path of justice inevitably led to the austere, unyielding architecture of the courthouse. The trial of David Miller commenced a tense legal struggle that held Willow Creek in its grip, casting a long, mournful shadow over the once tranquil community. The process, from the painstaking selection of the jury ordinary citizens, burdened with the solemn task of judging a man's life, to the meticulous presentation of every piece of evidence, unfolded with measured gravity. Each step illuminated the rigorous, often emotionally draining machinery of the legal system. The prosecution, helmed by a formidable district attorney, constructed an unassailable case. They meticulously braided together the silent, undeniable testimonies of forensic science with the chilling revelations of behavioral analysis. Detective Jenkins, her composure unwavering, presented the physical evidence with clinical precision. The irrefutable DNA found beneath Eleanor's fingernails, a visceral, microscopic link to her final desperate struggle, the rare blue-gray synthetic fiber, an undeniable signature left by the killer, and the partial fingerprint on the inside windowsill, an insidious detail confirming an intimate rather than forced point of entry. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the canine behaviorist, offered her expert testimony, explaining in clear, accessible terms how Barley's profound silence pointed unequivocally to a perpetrator known to the dog, systematically dismantling any lingering notion of a random intruder. Most damning, however, was the recorded confession of David Miller himself, played for the jury, his own voice raw with agitation and self-pity, admitting to the dark obsession and the horrific acts that followed. Miller's defense team, confronted by an overwhelming tide of evidence, valiantly attempted to introduce seeds of doubt. They painted a picture of a deeply disturbed man, prone to elaborate delusions, suggesting his confession was the product of psychological coercion rather than truth. They even reached for the desperate, cynical claim of a consensual secret affair between Miller and Eleanor, a last-ditch effort to rationalize the intimacy implied by Barley's behavior and the perpetrator's unique point of entry. However, these narratives collapsed under relentless cross-examination, entirely devoid of corroborating evidence and starkly contradicted by Eleanor's established character and stable, loving relationship with Marcus Thorne. The sheer cumulative weight of the forensic, behavioral, and confessional evidence rendered their efforts futile. During the victim impact statement phase, Eleanor's sister Clara Vance stepped forward. Her face, though etched with a grief that transcended time, radiated a profound, unshakable determination. This was the grieving family member, transformed into an unwavering advocate for her lost sister. Her voice, initially a fragile whisper, gained strength, filling the courtroom with a raw, piercing cry. "David Miller," she began, her gaze locking onto him with unblinking intensity. "You did not just extinguish Eleanor's light. You stole her future. You ripped our family apart, and you poisoned the very idea of trust in our community. You are a coward, and you are a monster." Her words, a powerful and deeply personal indictment, resonated with unvarnished emotional truth, demanding an immutable accountability from the man who had so cruelly stolen her sister's vibrant existence. After hours of tense deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom held its breath, a tangible, heavy silence pressing down. The foreperson's voice, steady and clear, delivered the verdict: guilty. A collective gasp, then a wave of profound yet somber relief rippled through the gallery. The guilty verdict was swift and decisive, a resounding affirmation of the meticulous investigative work and the undeniable evidence. For Eleanor's family, it provided a measure of formal closure, a legal acknowledgement of the truth, and a promise of retribution. Yet, as the gavel fell, the immense, profound weight of their loss remained an unfillable void that no verdict, however just, could ever truly mend. The long, arduous arc of justice had finally bent towards truth, but true solace in the shadow of such a profound and intimate betrayal remained an elusive aspiration. The final fall of the gavel silenced the courtroom, but its profound reverberations spread far beyond its walls, shaking the very foundations of Willow Creek. The community, once a haven of quiet comfort and unexamined neighborly trust, now grappled with a deep, unsettling unease. How could the man who waved from his porch, who offered small kindnesses, who walked Eleanor Vance's cherished dog, be the very monster who had brutally extinguished her life? This stark cognitive dissonance became a collective wound, a deeply ingrained scar on the town's psyche. Windows that once remained casually unlatched now held tightly drawn blinds. Casual hellos exchanged between neighbors often carried an unspoken question, a lingering, unsettling suspicion. The tranquil facade of Willow Creek had not merely fractured, it had disintegrated, revealing the chilling truth that a profound malevolence could flourish, hidden in plain sight, camouflaged by the most ordinary of smiles. A crime of such intimate betrayal leaves behind not just direct victims, but a poisoned well of trust. It irrevocably strips away the comforting illusion of safety that communities, especially those as seemingly serene as Willow Creek, so desperately cling to. The arduous lesson, seared into the collective consciousness, was that a newfound vigilance was no longer a choice but a stark necessity, an unwelcome constant companion in every quiet street, behind every familiar face. The predatory evils that had lurked unseen in the very fabric of their daily lives had been starkly exposed, forever altering the landscape of trust within their once peaceful enclave. For Marcus Thorne, Eleanor's grieving partner, the guilty verdict offered no true solace, only a stark legal confirmation of his immeasurable loss. The initial paralyzing shock had gradually given way to a grief so profound it manifested as a physical absence, a constant ache in the hollow of his being. His days, once meticulously structured by the demanding rhythm of surgery and the vibrant promise of Eleanor's presence, now drifted in a desolate, formless expanse. The beautiful garden Eleanor had so lovingly cultivated, once a source of shared joy, became a poignant, almost unbearable monument to her absence. He would often find himself there, his hands idly tracing the contours of a rose bush Eleanor had nurtured, engaged in a quiet internal struggle, the arduous fight to reconcile a shattered past with an uninvited, bleak future. He began slowly, hesitantly, to tend to her plants, a silent promise to keep a fragment of her spirit alive, a fragile act of defiance against the complete obliteration of his world. Eleanor's sister, Clara Vance, though equally ravaged by an enduring grief, forged a different, more active path towards healing and resilience. Her powerful victim impact statement had marked a pivotal turning point, transforming her from a grieving family member into a fierce, determined advocate for her sister's memory. In the aftermath of the trial, a new and unexpected responsibility presented itself. Barley, the silent witness, the loyal golden retriever, whose very stillness had inadvertently led to the unmasking of a monster desperately needed a home. Taking Barley in was a decision born of both profound necessity and an enduring, deep connection to the sister she had lost. Barley, too, bore the indelible, invisible scars of that horrific night. After the trauma, he had receded into himself, his once effervescent spirit replaced by a profound, pervasive weariness. His tail, once a perpetual motion of unbridled joy, now moved only with cautious hesitation. He would flinch at the sharpest sounds. His eyes, once so trusting, now held a deep-seated apprehension. At Clara's home, he moved with the hesitant grace of a shadow, often seeking out quiet, secluded corners, his large frame a poignant echo of the chilling stillness he had exhibited in Eleanor's living room. Yet under Clara's patient, unwavering kindness, a fragile tendril of hope, a whisper of healing began to emerge. She would sit with him for hours, her hand resting gently on his head, offering a silent, comforting presence that transcended words. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Barley began to respond. A soft, tentative nudge of his nose against her hand, a fleeting flicker of interest in a playfully tossed ball, a hesitant low thump of his tail when she spoke his name. These were not grand, dramatic gestures of recovery, but profound, incremental steps back from the harrowing abyss of his trauma. He remained ever watchful, his gaze often fixed on the front door or a subtly open window, a silent living reminder that the world could change in an instant, and that trust, once brutally betrayed, left an indelible mark on even the most loyal of hearts. In the quiet final scenes, months after the resounding verdict, Clara is seen tending her garden, now thoughtfully augmented with some of Eleanor's favorite plants, a vibrant living memorial to her sister's enduring spirit. Barley, his golden fur gleaming in the warm afternoon sun, lies peacefully nearby. His ears twitch at a distant passing sound, his head lifting slightly, but he does not bark. Instead, he turns his head slowly to meet Clara's gentle, understanding gaze, then rests his chin on his paws, a deep, contented sigh escaping him. He remains irrevocably a more cautious creature, forever altered by the horror he witnessed, but slowly, definitively, he is finding a measure of comfort, a renewed, fragile sense of belonging. The crime had irrevocably reshaped them all, but in the quiet companionship forged between Clara and Barley, in the slow, persistent turning of the earth in Eleanor's memory life, though indelibly scarred, found a way to move forward, carrying with it the fragile, enduring hope of human resilience. In the shattered stillness of Willow Creek, a trusting heart, a silent dog, and an open window revealed that true horror often hides not in the shadows, but in the most familiar of smiles. If the unsettling echoes of shattered trust and the silent revelations of unexpected witnesses compel you, subscribe to Shadow Files for more journeys into the truth. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Files and hit the notification bell.